Hi, it's me again. I'm Louise Richardson, Chair of the Selection Committee for Book Sandwiched In. As always, we'll do housekeeping first. Thank you to the rest of the Selection Committee, to Card Carrying Books on Market Street for their support, and to the church for letting us use this terrific space. Book Sandwiched In is a program of the Friends of the Library. These are the folks that bring us the biannual book sales, and they provide generous and substantial support to the library every year. They also were instrumental, and I've forgotten to mention this earlier, last March, April, May, when we were getting out the yes vote on our overriding the tax cap, which has resulted in the library having adequate operating funding. Let's see. If you're not a member of the Friends, or if you haven't renewed for this year, Kimberly at the table back there is happy to take your $5 or $10 if you are a family. Let's see. Oh, okay. As those of you who've been coming on a regular basis know, we had to skip one program because of a family emergency that happened to the presenter. What we've decided is we're going to move that review to next season, but we're also going to choose 6 new books next season, so next year we'll have 7 programs instead of 6.
So do that one first, so we don't know if that's
Right, well, and the
the
problem is, oh my, I actually remember that book for almost a year. Although what I do is the ones I've read a while back, including the one we're doing today, I read them as books, so second time around I listened to them, so that's good. Let's see. As always, if you could bring your chair over here, we'll have somebody loading them at the end of the day. We need to leave 12 on the floor. Oh, also, make sure that Kimberly has your email address, because we'll email updates, changes, that kind of thing about this. And I promise you the Friends do not inundate you with email. Everyone is just a little gem. If you haven't filled out one of the Libraries Are for Everyone postcards, these are, we collect these and they're given to our legislators shortly before the budget vote. We're lucky to have representatives who support libraries and go to bat for us, but it's really important for them to see how many people know how important our libraries are. So all you need to do is put your name and your county on the back and just leave it. They're over by the coffee there. Okay. This week's book is Mad Honey by Jodi Picoult and Jennifer Finney Boylan, presented by Dante Acquavella. For those of you who've been here before, you know I asked our presenters a couple of new questions that I had from the New York Times by the book column. Asked about their earliest library memory, Dante said, "The Belmar Public Library in Belmar, New Jersey was a sanctuary for me as a young child. It was more than just a place to borrow books. It was a gateway to endless fictional worlds that broadened my understanding of life far beyond my small corner of the world. In its quiet corners, I found safety, curiosity, and inspiration. The stories I discovered there helped me see new perspectives and imagine possibilities I hadn't dreamed of, shaping the way I view the world even today." So that's another reminder, like the rest of our presenters, of the profound impact our libraries have on children and continuing into adulthood. as far as a book that has had an impact on their life, Dante said, reading Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides as a young non-binary person gave me a way to think about my feelings toward my body that I hadn't found anywhere else. The story's exploration of identity and transformation felt deeply relatable, even though my experience is different from the protagonist's. It gave me language and perspective that helped me better understand myself. Dante is a nonprofit leader and community advocate with over a decade of experience in program development, grant administration, and equity-driven initiatives. As Director of Development at Corning Community College Development Foundation, they lead fundraising and donor engagement to expand educational opportunities. Previously, Dante worked for Corning Enterprises as a program manager, directing resources to minority, women-owned, and veteran-owned businesses, and led a re-entry workforce development initiative supporting individuals post-incarceration. An active member of the Southern Finger Lakes arts community, Dante combines a professional expertise with a passion for theater, contributing to local productions and fostering creative expression. As a non-binary person, they are committed to advancing inclusion and empowerment for underserved communities in all their work. Thanks, everyone, for coming today, and thank you, Dante.
Hello, everyone. How many of you were able to read the book? I was telling Louise that I had never read anything by Jodi Picoult before. Her genre of writing has not all been at the top of my list of books that I've read. So when she had asked me to present on this, I was like, this is an interesting exploration and a change of my typical world of reading and literature. And then I started reading it, and I found the book to be very relatable. It has inspired me to read more of Jodi Picoult's books. And thank you to Louise and to the library for asking me and inviting me to come here. So to start, one of the primary themes of the book is, what if someone you loved wasn't who you thought they were? And what if you had to choose between protecting them and facing the truth? Mad Honey is a mystery, it's a courtroom drama, and it's an exploration of love, identity, and justice. It's written by Jodi Picoult, who is known for writing issue-driven fiction, and Jennifer Finney Boylan, who is a transgender woman, an activist, and an author. The chapters in the book alternate between perspectives, as those who were able to read it know, and they go between Olivia, who is Asher's mother, and Lily, who's Asher's girlfriend, and it adds depth and authenticity to the story. I thought that it was really remarkable that Jodi Picoult asked Jennifer Finney Boylan to co-author this with her, to have the unique perspective that a person with lived experience of being a transgender person has, to write those chapters and to alternate. And there's one chapter that none of us know which one it is, that Jennifer Finney Boylan wrote one of Olivia's chapters, and Jodi Picoult wrote one of Lily's chapters. Which one is it? Don't really know. The themes in the book are deeply relevant today: misjudgment, bias, and hidden truths. And how often do we judge people based on what little we know of them? And think about the news stories that we hear about every single day that go viral before all the facts are known, before all sides of the story have been heard. In the court of public opinion, people are often found guilty before any real information is known. So I think that it resonated in a lot of different ways, considering the world we live in. So the premise of the book: Olivia McAfee and Asher Fields moved to Adams, New Hampshire after Olivia left an abusive marriage. She was married to a surgeon, Dr. Braden Fields, who did extremely well for himself and was well thought of and is well thought of and well regarded in the fields in which he works. But the secret of his life, and so many others and so many relationships, is he was controlling and abusive, and he isolated his wife from her friends, from the community, and forced her to live an existence that was not authentic to herself. It kept her prisoner, it kept her his captive. His jealousy and his controlling nature prevented her from having a career and a life that would have been fulfilling to her. The impetus of the move for Asher and Olivia was an incident where Asher, as a young child, stepped in between the violence between his mother and father, and he was caught in the middle of the fracas, and that was the impetus for them to move to Adams, which is her hometown. Olivia is a beekeeper, and that's the title of the book. Mad Honey refers to honey that contains gray antitoxins, which are toxic and narcotic, that are made from the rhododendron species. And it also is a reference to the toxic and intoxicating nature of relationships that are displayed throughout the book. Asher, as I had mentioned, is Olivia's son. He's 17 in the book, and he's a high school senior, very popular in his high school and a hockey star. And he falls in love with Lily, who's a new student, and she is thought of as mysterious. And as in any small area, Adams reminded me a lot of Corning. It has some real parallels. When any time new folks come to town, they're generally speaking well regarded and well received. But when you're different, when you're new to the area, people pay attention in a way that they don't to the average person who is walking down the street, who is a member of the well-known and well-regarded member of the community. So Lily is found to be intriguing, and Asher falls in love with her, and the primary focus of the plot point of the story is that she's found dead at the bottom of a staircase, and they're trying to figure out who murdered her. Was it Asher? And the novel shifts about, not at the immediate beginning of the book, but the novel shifts into a legal drama, and it uncovers secrets about Lily's past and assumptions about gender identity and justice. And Olivia faces difficult questions in the book of, is her son capable of violence? Has he inherited his father's temper? Do the sins of the father reflect upon the son? And we see this every day in the world. In cycles of abuse, many survivors of domestic violence fear that their children might inherit traits of an abuser, just like Olivia worries about Asher. And as I mentioned before, how does the court of public opinion shape what we believe? Some of the themes in the story are identity and secrets. So both Lily and Olivia hide truths. Olivia hides the truth about hidden aspects of her life, the truth of the nature of her relationship with her husband from a lot of individuals in her life. She keeps it very private. The people closest to her, not her son doesn't know the full details, but the people closest to her brother Jordan, who plays an important role in the book, knows the general gist of the relationship, but the full disclosure of exactly how violent the relationship was, exactly the damage that it caused, is something that she keeps close to her chest, as many individuals who are victims of domestic violence do. Lily struggles with revealing her identity as a transgender woman to Asher, and the novel raises the question, how well do we know the people we love? Many transgender individuals fear for their safety when disclosing their identity, and I think that that's important to mention, that the question becomes, how much of your identity, how much of your life, how much of your truth do you owe to other people? How much of your story do other people have the right to know? Was Lily a victim of murder because she was transgender? Was she a victim of murder because she hid the truth? Was she a victim of murder because it had nothing to do with any of these things? we don't really know this until the resolution of the story, which we'll discuss as we go on. Gender and identity are also a primary focus of the book. Lily's character challenges societal biases about transgender people, and Jennifer Boylan, who's a transgender author, brings authenticity to Lily's voice. The novel doesn't reduce Lily to her identity, but instead presents her as a fully developed character with dreams, fears, and relationship. Violence against transgender women, particularly trans women of color, is disproportionately high. Anti-trans legislation has increased in the US, restricting access to health care and legal rights. And in the past month, trans people have lost key federal protections regarding workplace discrimination. And many transgender people fear rejection when disclosing their identity to their romantic partners. A quote that really stood out to me in the book was this one. It says, "People want the world to be simple, but gender isn't simple much as some might want it to be. The fact that it's complicated and that there's a whole spectrum of ways of being in the world is what makes it a blessing. Surely nature or God or the universe is full of miracles and wild invention and things way beyond our understanding, no matter how hard we try." Can you hear me? I think the mic just went out.
Yes.
We aren't here on earth in order to bend over backwards to resemble everybody else. We're here to be ourselves in our gnarly brilliance. Another theme throughout the book is the bond between a mother and child. We'll start with Olivia and Asher. Olivia's love for her child is unwavering, but as the trial unfolds, she questions if she truly knows him. Her past trauma from domestic violence makes her fear that Asher might be capable of the same aggression as his father. And you see that in the way his relationship is portrayed throughout the novel with Lily. Like with many high school students, like with many teenagers, like with many individuals who are in any kind of relationships, they have their pressure points. They can be volatile, they can be toxic and unhealthy, as the name of the book refers to. When you're dealing with hormones and emotions as young teenagers and you're trying to figure out your place in the world, how different is this particular relationship from any other high school relationship? Is it different because Lily is a transgender person? Did Asher know Lily was even transgender? It comes through the book that yes, he did know. He is one of the only people in her lives that knew that she was transgender, but it took her a few months of relationship to disclose this to her partner, out of fear that she would lose him, that she would lose his respect, she would lose the relationship that she had built with his family, that she would lose her friend group because she was not out in school. We don't find out until about a third of the way through the book, once the trial commences, that Lily is even transgender. So the first third of the book, it's not a topic, it's not really mentioned, it's not really discussed, it's alluded to. But she existed in the world as a girl. She existed in the world as a woman. All of her friends knew her as a young woman. This is a picture actually of Point Reyes, which is where Lily and her mother Ava are from. Point Reyes is a national seashore about 30 miles north of California. Ava is a park ranger in the book, and I'm assuming that this is most likely where she was stationed. Ava is a single mother who has fiercely protected her child throughout her transition. Their relationship is built on deep love, but also on fear and survival. Ava worries about Lily's safety in a world that isn't always accepting. And after Lily's death, Ava fights to preserve her daughter's dignity, ensuring that her identity is not erased or used against her. Parents of trans children, like Ava, often become fierce advocates for their rights, especially in a climate where transgender youth face discrimination. Many families struggle with legal and societal barriers when fighting for their children's rights, and in several states, laws have been proposed or passed restricting trans youth from receiving gender-affirming care and making parental support even more critical. Ava's reason for moving to Adams was that Lily was attacked by members of her high school class, friends that she knew and that she had trusted after she had moved schools. She had been living her life as a young person. She was assigned male at birth. Never felt authentic to her, knew that she was not a boy from the time she was a young child. Her father never accepted it. Her father, much like Olivia's husband, was abusive in their home life. Abuse takes many forms. It doesn't have to be physical. And in this case, it was primarily emotional. It got violent at certain instances, but it wasn't as physically violent and brutal as the relationship Olivia was in. But the emotional scars don't make it any less damaging. When you don't have the visible scars, oftentimes it's more, I don't want to say more difficult to find the words and the voice and the help, but it's a different set of circumstances that you experience as you try to navigate the world. Another theme throughout the book is the theme of justice and bias. It deals with gender bias in the courtroom. Asher is assumed to be violent because of his father's past. Lily's identity is weaponized against her, framing her as deceptive. Would Asher's case have been handled in the same way if he were a black or brown person? Jordan, Asher's lawyer and his uncle, he believes in the legal system but struggles to defend his client, his nephew, amid public bias and with the feeling of having information withheld from him. He didn't know that Lily is transgender. That wasn't disclosed to him pre-trial, pre-legal proceedings. And his wife is a black woman who questions the racial bias in the system, especially as the mother of her young son, Makkai. And she worries, would Makkai receive the same benefit of the doubt as Asher? Mad Honey challenges us to reconsider assumptions about love, identity, race, and justice, and the novel's not just a courtroom drama, it's a reflection of the world we live in today. Transgender individuals still face legal battles over healthcare access, identification documents, and discrimination in schools and workplaces. Recent legislations restricted gender-affirming care for minors in several U.S. states. High-profile cases, such as the debate over trans athletes in sports, continue to shape public perception and policy. And the book highlights how identity affects how someone is treated in the legal system. Real-life cases, such as those involving the trans panic defense, show how bias can lead to unjust rulings. Studies reveal that trans individuals, particularly trans women of color, face higher rates of wrongful convictions and harsher sentences. Books like Mad Honey bring visibility to marginalized communities and humanize their struggles. Representation in the media, whether it's in books, movies, or news, affects how society understands and empathizes with different identity. Literature fosters conversations that can lead to meaningful change in policies and societal attitudes. So I wanted to give that type of an overview of the book. I didn't want it to be a direct retelling of the exact story from start to finish, because I wanted to get that information out there. And I also wanted to engage with all of you about the topics in the book and what your thoughts on the book, and were there any particular themes that stuck out to you? Did any of you ever doubt Asher's innocence? And why or why not?
So I think through the writing, that scene where someone is knocking on the door, and she goes and opens the door, I just knew it wasn't Asher, and knew it had to be someone else. I didn't think it was the person who it was. I thought it was another one of the high school students. So.
Throughout most of the book up until the end, I thought that Lily was murdered by her father. I thought that was going to be how it played out. in the resolution of the book, we find out that it's Maya, who was Asher's childhood best friend and Lily's closest friend when she moved to school. She didn't move to Adams, moved to the area and started school. Maya had no idea that Lily was transgender. Lily wasn't murdered because she was transgendered. Lily was murdered because Maya was jealous of her relationship with Asher, and that she was a beautiful young woman who was popular and had taken her best friend away from her. It was an accident. It wasn't an intentional murder. Lily also had a health condition that's disclosed about in the book that caused more rapid blood loss, more cranial pressure. She died from traumatic brain injury. And that's, you know, the resolution of it all. It's the juxtaposition of all of this, you know. It's just that she was a person, and another person was jealous of her gender identity. Didn't have anything to do with it. How do you all think that the trial might have been different if Lily were cisgender? And cisgender, for folks who aren't sure, is a person who identifies with the gender that they were assigned at birth, who was born for young boys who were born with male genitalia and identify as boys, and for young women who are born with female genitalia and identify as women.
I think that the trial, once we found out that Lily was trans, the trial took on a whole different light. And that is basically, in my viewpoint, where Asher started to get a break, if you want to say that, because they turned it around on Lily that she was not trustworthy in letting people know that she was trans, as if that is something that she had to have shared. But basically, once it was discovered that she was trans, all of a sudden there was a mark against her.
I felt the same way. And I was a little bit, to be very honest, I was a little bit nervous about presenting on something that is actually my lived experience. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I lived the first half of my life as a female. I came out in high school in my small town I grew up in New Jersey. I was one of the first out lesbian members of my high school graduating class, even though I knew at that point my whole life that didn't fit. But I also knew that I wasn't a man, that I didn't identify with as being a man. And up until relatively recently, you kind of had to pick and choose. In order to receive any kind of gender affirming care, you had to pick a side. Either being non-binary wasn't something that was really an option. So within the past decade, I realized that it was an option. Nobody else gets to dictate what your gender identity is, who you are, how you live your life. Federal courts can try, but they don't get to dictate to you personally who you are. So my voice is shaking. I'm a little bit nervous just because of all of that. I am known well enough in the community, but I don't very often speak of what my own lived experience has been. So thank you for bearing with me while we go through this.
Thank you for being here.
May I have a comment? Because the most part of the book resonate with me is that the fact that the author painted the bright side of the story by having someone is the beekeeper. Bee, as you know, has no consciousness, has no ethical concept. They work hard just as if they know the purpose of their life is working and bring up the offspring, and of course make sure the queen bee will continue to produce offspring to keep the colony as normal as possible. So whereas if you look at our human being and the human society, we have consciousness. We talk a lot about ethics, but if we compare ourselves to the little insect, the bee, I was wondering whether there's any comparison.
Yeah, that is a really good question, and I hadn't even thought about that. I think, you know, the queen is the master mistress of her colony, and I thought of Olivia as I thought of her as the figurehead, even though it could have been any other of the female characters in the book. She is the one that I went to because she's the one who is keeping it together, even though she doubts her son and his innocence because of her own lived experience. She has to continue to live and exist in this town. The biases that are perceived against her son are not specific to him. It also deeply impacts her and her family and her business. There's a scene throughout the book, in the middle of the book, where the honey that she brings to farmer's market is smashed. And you know, so I was like, well, Olivia is, you know, the queen bee. You know, how do you feel? What are your thoughts on how human beings and the bees relate?
Well, you know, we are in an era of chaos, and I wrote a little poetry. If you have a minute, I want to read it.
Sure, please do.
To be or not to be, I would like to be with the bee, which has existed before the humanity. And we all know the West and the rest has never been the first. And that sun always rises in the east. Nevertheless, the West has big feast. Let no one here to be silenced or to forget that democracy will last on our planet. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for sharing.
bonjour.
Thank you. Yes.
You started out talking about the abused wife. And my question is, we all like to think we're present. But what if, you know, a woman, I think in many cases, has to pick up, whether dating or something like that, the red flags of what this man is like. Or, you know, she did not pick up on that he's a controller. You know, this is, and you didn't mention red flags in this thing. They come up and tell us certain things. We'd like to think we are present, that we pick up on these things. Does it go more into the red flag that you should be picking up on to protect yourself?
I don't think it explicitly goes into that. You know, it does mention the red flags, that he is controlling of where she goes, what she does, who she speaks to. how she exists in the world. He needs to know where she is at all times, how she dresses, how she responds to him, how she reacts to his romantic and sexual advances towards her. And she married him.
But the abuse really showed up after
Yeah,
that.
right.
And she loved him. I mean, she's very clear in this that she continued to love him even though he was abusive. And it was not until he was abusive to her son that she said, this
No
is
more.
over.
And there were, she mentioned that throughout their courtship, throughout the early stages and even throughout their engagement, he was the ideal partner. He was the dream partner. She had told him what her dream partner was, and he molded himself into being that,
Red flag.
which is certainly a red flag. But you don't know until, in a lot of instances, you don't know until you know.
We have to be careful not to blame the victim.
Absolutely.
Right.
100%, it's never the victim's fault. It is the abuser's fault. There may be red flags along the way, but those red flags could also just have been yellow flags. Relationships have issues. Oftentimes you can work through them. You want to believe the best in your partner. You don't want to believe that they are an abusive monster, and you don't want to believe that they're beyond redemption even when you are in the midst of abuse. You are always, not everyone, it's a generalization, but oftentimes you're thinking of the good times, especially once you've built a family, especially once you have a life together, especially when somebody has made you completely dependent upon them because they are the primary breadwinner in the family and you can't really work and live a life. Your job is to stay home with your child and raise your child and take care of the house. In those types of ways and in those types of coercive relationships, it's much harder to leave. And you'll find that it's the likelihood of being murdered is exponentially higher as you prepare to leave. If your abuser knows you're leaving, as you prepare to leave and once you have actually left, that's the most dangerous time for you. While you're actively in the relationship, it's a control issue. It's a control thing. People will abuse their partner to the point of injuring them, but not to the point of death, because once they're gone, they have no control.
Finally, I found out that you're interested in languages, and I wonder, I can ask this audience, do you know the origin of the English name bee? It is originated from Chinese. It means, in Chinese, means busy, working hard. And you can sometimes also associate the English word be with business. That's business. You have to work hard and work all the time and so forth.
I had to think about your question earlier, and I was like, how are human beings and bees? How does this, interconnect? And I think of that, and I think I'll just, maybe not so much of as the book, but I'm thinking of in our daily lives. Currently, we live in a very uncertain world, volatile world, but we all have to continue to go about our business. We are focusing, bees stay busy. They have the one goal, and I think that's the way that human beings are existing in the world. We are trying to survive. We are all kind of worker bees. What is the end goal? Everybody's goal is individual. But as we navigate the world in this uncertainty, I'm finding in my own experience at work, I need to keep my day busy from start to finish so that my mind doesn't get distracted from the horrors. And Bees, they stay on task, they stay on focus, they keep going. So I think we do have a lot of similarities. Would you like to?
Well, in a hive, they're all columns.
Right,
There is no individuation.
right.
And humans are, in the West at least, seems to be individuation. And I think that's a fascinating question. And don't turn it back on me because I have no answers.
Right, no, and none of us do, that's
Right.
right. And that is, and throughout the book, everybody is very distinct. All of the characters are distinct. None of them are very similar. There is lots of individuation in between all of the characters, like there are in between us. So while we have our similarities, we still have those striking differences.
And it's the individuation that we protect most closely.
Right.
And why we struggle so hard with being forthright about who we are, how we feel, what we believe.
Right. And another theme throughout the book that I didn't mention was that Asher had a secret relationship with his father. His mother had kept him from his father because of the abuse and because she didn't want for him to suffer like she did. Were there also personal reasons, selfish reasons? Sure, probably. There always are in any situation. But, her primary goal and focus was protecting her son from this individual who had caused so much damage. But he had sought out his father and tried to to repair that relationship. That's a secret that he kept that comes out, throughout the book. His uncle finds out that he has this relationship with his father. We all have secrets, even, this hockey star, blonde-haired, handsome high school senior who seems to have the world in front of him. No one is immune from pain. No one's immune from secrets. And it's, how do we navigate the world as flawed, complicated individuals who are all just trying to find our way. What's your question?
I was thinking with that too, when you were saying all that I was thinking it was like we have our own queen bee.
Can you speak louder?
I said we have our own queen bee, and you're constantly trying to protect it.
Right. Everybody has their own queen bee. And whatever that means to you, isn't always a person.
I think one of the most important statements that you've said today, and I feel it should be shouted from the rooftops and spread to everyone, is that no one deserves or needs to know your story. I'm paraphrasing how you said that, but your story, your truth is your own. And I think social media can be a wonderful thing. I mean, I have my phone on me constantly. I'm constantly looking things up. I love that fact of it. But the nasty social media part of it, and I am sad for the youth of the generation, my children, and that generation, because the bullying and the comments have just, it's hard enough to say something to someone face to face. Many people enjoy that and do it, but it's so easy to do it online, and I think generations have grown up with the thought that they can say anything, do anything, give you their opinion, and you are entitled to their opinion. They're not entitled to yours, but you're entitled to hear theirs, and that's the society belief now. And I think it's taken decades for people to at least understand what gay means. They don't accept it many places still, but at least they kind of understand the word now. That's more socially acceptable. But in regards to transgender, because it is an internalized situation and not always an outwardly looking thing, I think that's such a struggle that many people just will never understand, and it's such a difficult thing to accept. I mean, I've had 3 transgender people in my life that I've been lucky to have known. So I feel like I'm kind of up a peg of understanding what people go through, but I myself can never truly understand it because I am a cisgender female. But, you know, that's just kind of more of a statement, but I want to thank you for being brave enough, because it is a very brave thing to stand up there, to tell your truth, to share your truth. And again, just want to reiterate to people, whether you understand it or not, whether you accept it or not, it doesn't matter. In all honesty, it doesn't matter. It is that person's own truth and their story. And if they're brave enough to share it, that's wonderful, and thank you for pushing the message to have people understand. But I guess, you know, just kind of a long-winded way to say, please be kind, please understand other people, and whether you understand it or not, acceptance and kindness is key. So thank you for your journey and sharing it with us.
And we're all just human beings. At the end of the day, we're all just people who are trying to, you know, have peace in our own lives and in our own families and in our own existence. It really struck me, Lily's doctor in the book. Another theme of the book is that Lily had gender-affirming surgery as a minor. Her mother fought against it for much of her life, even though Lily knew that she was a girl from the time she was a very young child, because that's something that you can't, once you have surgery, you can't undo that. And the doctor's way of making the mother understand that, you know, no, Lily is a girl. This is making her live in this body that she feels trapped in is cruel. It's inauthentic. She's never going to live her truest experience, her best experience. And with mental health professionals, medical professionals, all kinds of medical professionals saying, no, this child is a girl. You know, there's a lot of pushback, you know, against the medical field, and you know, just very recently, minors are no longer in certain states allowed to receive gender-affirming care. So it's just something, you know, with everything that's going on in the world today, it's just something to keep it you know, in the back of your mind. There's one person before you. I just wanted to.
Yeah, that was going to be my point. That Lily started her care before she hit puberty. You know, she had puberty blockers when she was going to hit puberty. There's another character in the story, the owner of the music store, Elizabeth,
yeah.
who had her care when she was an adult. And when Lily walks into the store, she automatically recognizes this person as transgender. And it sounded in the story that everyone recognized Elizabeth as being transgender. So I was going to ask, it almost sounded like it's better, the earlier you start the care, I don't know, is it?
I think it's very individual. I didn't start gender-affirming care until I was 35,
Okay.
40. So even though I knew that it was, you know, it would have, knowing now that it was a possibility, I wish that I had started as a young child, because I feel like it could have, I'm openly in the recovery community. I am a recovering alcoholic and an addict. And I wonder, and I was just talking to my partner the other day about this, how would my life have been different if I had known that I didn't have to choose, that I didn't feel trapped in my own body, and that every time I looked in the mirror, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. How different could my life have been from the time I was 17 until I was 30, when I got sober? How would things have been different? So I think the answer is, it's different for every individual, but more often than not, yes. And true, as a better to start young than in midway through your life. Somebody over here had a question.
Well, not really a question. I wanted to say that one of my favorite parts of the book was during the trial when a very distinguished doctor spoke and really explained how transgender comes about, the surgery, the whole part of it. And I thought for people who just can't or are unwilling or unable or just don't know, that was so interesting. It didn't change my mind, it just, because I already thought it was okay, but it was just very, very interesting. And I thought really very well done. And I am assuming that Jennifer Finney Boylan wrote that chapter.
I'm assuming so as well.
And she did it beautifully. I thought it was really very interesting and a real like public service almost, and part of a really wonderful book that I loved.
I loved the book as well. I thought it was a strength of the book. I know some other people may have felt differently, that the alternating chapters was distracting, or that it was it interrupted the continuity of the story. But I really thought that that was an important component of the book, was each chapter relates to the other, but it's being told from the other person's perspective. You know, and it's also not just from a cisgender woman's perspective and a transgender woman's perspective. It's different points of life as well. Olivia is in her, I don't think her age is specifically mentioned, and if it is, it's not at top of my mind, but I'm assuming she's in her 50s, and Lily's 17. So to have those two different perspectives about love and relationship would, you know, and there's also the question, you know, if she had lived, would the volatility of her relationship with Asher have continued? Would they have found this common ground? Would they have stabled and steadied in their young adult years? You know, you never know, because, you know, they didn't have that opportunity. But at the end of the day, he had his tendencies. He did put his hands on her. Those are certainly signs and warnings of abuse. Not excusable, certainly. So, you know, it's just one of those questions that lingers.
Dante, Jill?
Yes.
Okay, is it me?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. I have not read the book yet. Jennifer Finney Boylan I'm a big fan. Years ago I read her book, she's not there. She has a big, long article in New York Times today,
Yes.
if you have a chance to read it. And one thing I like about her is her sense of humor. And I just wondered, this is a dark book. Does she have any little, is there any little humor in it at all?
Not like in her memoirs.
Yeah.
I don't think.
It's pretty, there's not a lot of levity in the book.
I didn't think there would be a
Yeah,
lot. I just
yeah.
wondered.
There are moments of lightness.
I mean, even her column this morning,
Yeah.
it's hysterical.
You have to laugh to get through it.
Yeah,
That's,
right.
you know, that's.
Yeah, so that column is she has I think it's her 5th memoir, is just being published now.
Yeah, it's called
So
Cleavage.
Cleavage, yeah.
Did somebody over here have their hand raised as well?
I'm going back to Kimberly, and she was mentioning, we today seem to take opinions as fact. And often if you ask somebody if they give you an opinion, where they get that, what sustains their opinion? What information do they have? Well, how did they arrive at this opinion? And it falls apart. In many cases, you want to make things stable and solid, but if you start to ask the questions, somebody gives you an opinion, how did you arrive at this? What, they'll seem, because they're not fact. It's just what that paper came up with, and we all have different reasons.
You know, everybody,
But I recommend just asking somebody who has an opinion, how did you arrive at that, what's the basis?
right, I mean, I think that, you know, everyone's opinions are formed by their own experiences. Facts are facts, science is science. There are certain things that are not changeable. The sky is blue, the grass is green. And it's important to keep your worldview open, that other people have not had the same lived experience as you. They're not going to feel the same way as you. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and like you said, just because it's your opinion doesn't make it fact, but the world is full of gray.
Or if I may add to that list, we as human beings seem to pick who we want to mate with. And a queen bee, when she goes up and goes off, mates with anybody. She doesn't pick it up. She just mates with a big difference there.
I did have, this book, there are a lot of things about this book that really resonated with me, and as the mother of a trans woman, you can understand why. But the thing that I really loved the most is that you don't find out that Lily is trans until halfway through. So you get to meet her as a person, as a human being, before you get to learn something that a lot of people would make judgments about.
Right, and she is just like any teenage girl. She speaks of her interests and her romantic relationships and her friendships and the things that she enjoys doing, like any person, a young woman would do. You know, and it certainly was, I'm sure it was intentional that reveal wasn't until the middle of the book. There were clues along the way, but you know, it wasn't until, you know, that certain point.
Yeah, I maybe am doing the busy bee thing. I'm trying to keep my life very full right now, as you are, and I didn't even read the back cover. I just started the book, so I had no idea that there was any potential for a trans character in the book. I just picked it up so I could come today, and so I wish everybody could read it that way, because it made me stop and question, what's it matter, right? At that point, like, does that change? That doesn't change my opinion of this human.
Right.
What does it matter? And to that point, like, what does she owe anybody? Like, that's her life now. Why?
Right.
Yeah, so
why does she have to share that?
for me, the conversation between Olivia and Elizabeth was just so beautiful.
It was remarkable.
All of that. It was such a remarkable piece of writing and so full of exactly what you've been talking about, the, you know, privacy versus sharing, and how much do you owe other people.
Unless it directly impacts that other person's life and is going to cause them harm, it's not their business.
That's what I was going to say, Louise, that conversation really stuck with me. Olivia asking Elizabeth these questions, and Elizabeth is saying, that's none of your business. And I thought, she's right, that's none of her business. She doesn't need to know that for anything. And when Elizabeth says something like, there's a difference between a secret and something that's private.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I actually have, maybe I have that on here?
Yeah.
Because it stuck out with me. I think, honestly, Elizabeth, I think, was my favorite character. in the
Yes,
book.
me too.
So let's go on back here.
Where's the line between keeping something secret and being dishonest?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
what is that line and who gets to draw it?
Right.
Somebody else had their hand raised.
I just have a comment. I think a lot of people have opinions
on different things. And their opinion really doesn't matter. And sometimes their opinion changes. I had a case where there was this parent who was very homophobic. And he was always saying things, and I was always correcting this man. And then I get a phone call from him. His daughters are lesbians. And because there was two faces that he loved, changed his whole attitude. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind.
Dick Cheney.
It can be anybody, and it's not wrong. And put a face to the word gay.
Right. Or
transgender.
And I've actually had this conversation really recently, living in this region. It is, people have varying, levels of acceptance of the LGBTQ community. Not everybody knows that I'm non-binary. Not everybody knows my story. More often than not, people assume that I'm a cisgender gay man when they meet me. So when I mention my female partner, they're very confused. It's not, people wouldn't necessarily know my story unless I directly tell them. And I've worked in small business development. I'm up at the college now, but I've worked in business lending and small business development for a decade prior to that. And I've worked in theater most of my life since I was a small child, actually. And it's, people will have their opinion, and they'll be like, oh, well, but Dante's different. Dante's okay. I experience that a lot. Yeah, they're the exception to the rule. So I think it's absolutely 100% when you have a face to put to the name, it makes the story more personal. You have the experience of knowing a person with that experience, and it humanizes something that you just may not have, be educated on. You may not know, what it means to be LGBTQ, any one of those letters, or any other number of things, not even specific to being, a member of the LGBTQ community. I think of individuals who are also disabled. There's a lot of biases, and a lot of, my sister's deaf and has developmental disabilities. If somebody isn't in a wheelchair, they may have, it doesn't mean they're not disabled. They may have an invisible disability, and in those instances, you also don't get to decide whether or not that person is disabled. Like, you don't get to decide whether that person is transgender or not.
I recently read something that I thought was a thunderbolt of understanding. There was a famous actor who was now a former alcoholic, and in conversation with somebody, he said, "What other people think of me is none of my business." Yep. And I thought, wow, it removes the ability of that person to hurt you. It doesn't invalidate that other person, but it doesn't empower them either. And you don't spend your time, it's none of my business what they think of me. And I just thought that was pretty amazing.
And where I had first heard that quote was in one of my recovery meetings, one of my very first recovery meetings when I was really struggling. And that was before I had realized that I was non-binary or could identify as non-binary, that it was an option. It's what other people think of me is none of my business. And the person who the quote is most attributed to, it's very unclear to me whether or not they actually said it or not, because I think it's hard to find when it was said, is actually Mark Twain.
Oh.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other aspect of the book that they'd like to discuss that I didn't touch upon?
I just want to say how much much I liked the two mothers, Ava and Olivia. And they were so strong because they made a really difficult move, both of them, to protect their child. So I thought that was really very telling, and I was really able to connect with that. But I really liked in the notes at the back, Jennifer said how much she loved Ava and really had wanted Ava, Lily's mother, to be a bigger character. And I wouldn't be surprised if that character turns up in another book sometime because she was very, very interesting. And imagine, when they were looking at a photo album and Lily as a young child, and Asher was saying, "That looks exactly like you, Lily."
Is that your brother?
I said, yeah. And they said, oh, he's no longer with us. Asher assumed the child had died.
Right.
But Ava, I don't think she said it to him, I don't really remember, but she said, that was a really big loss. But what I got in return was so wonderful. And it was really so emotional to me that the mother accepted her child. It was her child, boy, girl, whatever, that was her child.
And a mother's love for their child is probably the primary theme throughout the whole story, bigger than any other storyline in the book, is that, what a mother will do to protect their child at all costs. Even in the face of a legal challenge where you yourself question, did my child do this? And the answer is, I don't know, but they're my child, and I will love them regardless of what they do, because individuals are more than their worst mistake.
Yeah, so Jenny has said that she wants a sequel that features Ava. She doesn't know if it'll happen.
I hope it does. I haven't read any of Jodi Picoult's other books, but I know that Jordan McAfee is a recurring character in her books, so I think there's a strong potential that there could be.
Yeah. I appreciated all the facts about bees and honey. So
Yes.
That takes up a lot of space in the book.
Yes. And I hadn't really spent much time prior, to reading the book about thinking about the process of how honey is made and how difficult it is, and that like with life, you die at the end.
On a fun note, read E.B. White's poem on bees. It's fun. Yeah. It's really a really nice poem.
Are there any other thoughts or comments? Any other plot points in the book that weren't really touched on that you'd like to go over?
Great job, thank you.
Well, thank you. I know the first half was a little bit heavier on the facts, so thank you for doing it.